Welcome to the Biblical Eldership Podcast. We are in chapter 22 today, the biblical qualifications for God's steward. We really pick up, Alex, this the whole idea of the steward in God's house and the significance of the qualifications. And we're going to talk about 5 in this chapter: not be arrogant, not be quick-tempered, not be a drunkard, not be violent, and not be greedy for gain. This is the requirement of God's steward. Let's start with not arrogant. This is the 4th qualification Paul mentions to Titus. What does it mean to not be arrogant?
Well, isn't that interesting when he speaks of the God's steward? The first thing he says, not arrogant. This word's not really easy to bring over into English. You'll see the different translations. Not self-willed, that's good. Not overbearing. The idea, the word implies a self-loving spirit, which in seeking only to gratify itself is regardless of what others think. So you might think of just a self-willed, stubborn person.
Diotrephes.
Yes, perfect example of Diotrephes, a man who loved to put himself first.
Yeah, it's amazing how relevant Diotrephes becomes in this book. It's
is.
a great anti-example of what God requires as an elder.
That's a good way to put it. Yes, people need to know 3 John 9 and 10. If you don't know it, turn to it and understand that Diotrephes, he's the narcissistic pastor. He's the bully. He's the man who likes to put himself first, and people have to bow to him.
Yeah, it's striking to me how relevant this is today in our age of the bully type pastor, the arrogant pastor. You mentioned here also not a team player. Elaborate maybe a little bit on that.
Yes, this type of personality, this type of character doesn't prize peer relationships. He doesn't want to be part of the team. He has to be the team leader always. Has a hard time listening to others.
Don't like accountability.
Oh, yes. That's something that you will see at the heart of all of this. They really don't want genuine peer accountability. Fellow colleagues who can look him right in the face and say, you're not going to do that.
Would the word irreproachable fit into this qualification as an example, or is that something else?
I think it's okay, yes.
Now,
this person wants more authority, less accountability.
Yeah. One misunderstanding you highlight is that elders really do need to exercise authority. They do have to confront sin at times, and so we shouldn't. The point you make is we shouldn't mistake any kind of leadership that's a good kind of leadership as being arrogant.
Well,
right.
When people get angry at their leaders, they'll usually use insulting words. You're a Diotrephes, or you're a bully, you're self-willed. They'll use this verse against them. But elders have to discipline.
Right.
They have to confront, and they need to press the congregation forward. They need to move the church forward and address issues, and very hard issues.
In other words, people need to be careful not to just because they don't like an elder. Oh, he's arrogant. No, they may be just leading and doing the right thing. Like Paul had to do this. Right?
Well, this happened to Moses. The sons of Korah, they called him every name in the book, and they said, you're trying to dominate us. You've taken our children out into the wilderness to kill us. Right. But Moses was doing the will of God.
Right. So not arrogant. The next one is not quick-tempered, not a hothead. Talk to us about this qualification.
Well, again, we're talking about the steward, not hot-tempered, not prone to anger. This is a person who can't control their temper. And, in the Lord's work, there's a lot of stress. There's strong beliefs in our doctrines and what we hold to. And you have to often arbitrate. And if you're a hothead and you have a quick temper, you go from 0 to 10 in 1 second, you're going to hurt people very badly, and you're going to cause more problems.
It was good you highlight just the very character an attribute of our Lord, that he is slow to anger, patient and suffers long. I think that's a great thing to remind us of.
Here it's pointed up, a quick-tempered elder can short-circuit elders' meetings, hinder honest discussion of difficult issues, prevent constructive problem-solving conversations because of their ugly words and angry looks. People get frightened, they're intimidated, and they don't go forward.
Can be a real pain in the neck for an eldership. I love that you highlighted Hudson Taylor, the great 19th century missionary. In his own confession of struggling with anger, he said, my greatest temptation is to lose my temper over the slackness and inefficiency so disappointing in those on whom I depend. It is no use to lose my temper, only kindness, but it is such a trial.
Well, Hudson Taylor was such a high-powered energy person, extremely competent and intelligent. So yes, working around a man like that, you better come up to his bar, his standard of competency and work. And so yes, a man like that often has to deal with the fact that most people aren't as energetic as he is or competent. And you have to be kind and understanding. I think that's a big word, understanding of others. You know, some people can juggle 2 balls. Some people can juggle 5. Hudson Taylor could juggle 12 balls and keep them all in the air.
Yeah. The next one we looked at, not arrogant, not quick-tempered, not drunkard, not violent. You spent some time on this in 1 Timothy, so you don't get into it as much there. But the next one is not greedy for gain. What does this mean? Talk to us about this.
Well, first of all, I want to just remind us, each of these words, not a drunkard, not violent, not greedy for gain, all come back to God's administrator. He cannot be a person of this character. He cannot be a person who's greedy for, notice it's dishonest gain. It's the person who uses Christian ministry and people's trust to profit in an unlawful way. Someone like Judas. And this is a much bigger problem than people realize. Embezzling money, misappropriating church money. It's a huge problem, and that's why you must have accountability when we deal with church money. It's other people's money. And if a person has a problem with money, the idea here is shamefully greedy for money, fond of dishonest gain. This person will do almost anything to fleece the flock to gain financial profit. They see people as dollar signs.
It's a good time to be reminded of Acts 20 when Paul says, I coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel.
That's quite a statement. I don't know if any of us could make that statement. Not that he didn't take gold or silver, but he didn't covet anyone's silver or gold. Instead, in the most amazing way, with his own hands, he provided his own needs and the needs of those around him. What an example to us of generosity, hard work, and godliness of character.
So, bigger picture here in Titus, Paul has just given a number of negative things in terms of can't be X, Y, and Z, but now he shifts and gives 7 positive virtues, starting in verse 8, and contrasting with the negative ones. But we start with hospitable again. We covered that. You covered that in 1 Timothy 3. But the next one is a lover of good. What does this one mean?
Now, David, can I force you back on hospitality? I know we discussed it, but this is one close to my heart because very few churches realize that one of the qualifications for their elders, overseers, stewards is hospitality. Let me ask you, why do you think this would be, and it's the first qualification in the positive list, why do you think this is so important?
Well, I don't know if this is the right answer, but it strikes me that what Paul seems to be saying is an elder actually has to love people. It's not just, this really grates against the bored elder mentality, but I think he has to live out the Christian life. And I think I think this is one of those qualifications that really punctuates that.
Yes, every time we have hospitality, it's related to love, self-sacrifice, and it's the way we build relationships. In the local church, relationships are so central to the community. And there's no way better to get to know people than to have them at your home, have them at your table, eat together, share your life. When were you saved? When were you married? Tell us about your children. And you walk away from that experience knowing the person much better than just a half hour on Sunday morning getting to talk to people.
You know, there may be no other qualification that so contradicts the board eldership as this one. So closely related, though, is the lover of good. Talk to us about that.
Well, it's a very unusual phrase. One Greek lexicon defines the word as one who willingly and with self-denial does good and is kind, ready to do what is beneficial for others.
So you highlight there's a real practical aspect to this qualification. A doer of good deeds, hospitality, of course, would be one of them. But even just mercy ministry, care for the weak.
How about someone in the church is moving? And you get a group of people together and you say, hey, let's go over and help them.
Alex,
it's a tough job.
Don't do that one. That's the worst. That is the worst one.
Listen, I had many years. It seemed like almost every weekend we were helping someone move. I don't think I could do that today. Man. But it's just an example of kindness. You're thinking of doing good to people. They need a ride to the hospital, need a visit. It's a person who's looking out practically for other people.
Think of how Luke describes Jesus in Acts, saying, he went about doing good.
Yes, isn't that beautiful? Well, this is the practical side of eldership. We do emphasize the doctrinal side and the side of character of above reproach. But here is something right down practical where we live. You need your car fixed. You need a ride. You're having problems with something in your home that needs to be fixed. Oh, there's so many practical ways. And sometimes we can't do these things ourselves, but we can get someone else to do them.
The next one is self-controlled. And that we know that's not a very important qualification. So let's go to the next one, chapter 12. Now, any comments on self-controlled? I know we, again, covered this in 1 Timothy.
Well, if you remember, we said that this particular virtue really is covered by other ones like not a lover of money, not a drunkard. All those come under
self-control.
The self-control. And what it tells us, it's a person who is not out of control with their emotions or their desires. In a moment, we'll see there's the whole aspect of the physical, sexual, eating, sleeping. There's control over the bodily desires, which can really take us to a very bad place and overpower us. So a person must have, and it's one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, have a sense of self-control in all these aspects of life.
Upright is the next one Paul mentions. And what does this mean?
Well, it's interesting. He uses these different terms. And what's very interesting to me is very rarely do you hear in assessing a person's character for eldership, these ones devout or upright. So upright means righteous, just. I would say an upright person is a principled person. He's law-abiding, he's ethical, he's conscientious of making just and righteous decisions. So it's what we see in the book of Malachi.
High integrity.
High integrity, yes. Zephaniah linked Israel's judges to evening wolves who come out in the dark night to devour people, and the priests to those who do violence to the law, and prophets, those who are treacherous men. They were not righteous men. They were not just men. They were not men of integrity. These leaders in Israel were the problem.
You mentioned an important statement on page 230. A righteous steward does not cover up the sins of other church officials or friends who've spiritually abused people, sexually mistreated women or children, misappropriated church funds, abused their authority, or plagiarized other people's sermons. All very relevant, but really would all fall under the category of upright.
Yes, the person whose policy always is do the right thing. I used to have a friend who used to always say that. Do the right thing. Obey the law of the Lord. Seek justice. Be fair. Be even-handed when you have to make judgments about people. And people know that. They know if you're a balanced, just, fair person, or if you're the kind of person that goes off the deep ends on either side of the ship.
Alex, is this the same word that Paul uses in Titus when he says the grace of God's appeared, trains us to renounce ungodliness, worldly passions, and live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives? It's the same word?
Yes. It's an important concept in the Old Testament to be a righteous, just person.
Like Job.
Like Job, yes, it's said of Job. And we want elders who we can get fair judgments from them. They're going to do the right thing, not just a convenient thing.
Yeah.
So it's, again, coming back to the character of the stewards of God's household, because we're handling other people's money, other people's lives. We're making judgments. People will come to us to make a judgment. Or
they need to know that they're going to get an honest, righteous verdict if they come to the elders.
Well, we're going to follow the law of God. We're going to follow the word of God. And that's our standard. We don't just make these judgments just something that pleases us.
All right, this 13th qualification is holy. What's encompassed in the meaning of this word?
Well, some of your translations use the word devout. I particularly like that. I want you to notice the two words, upright and holy, are not abstract qualities. They're observable qualities, witnessed by both people and God. And what we're talking here is we're referring to people who are devout Christians, godly, faithful believers, a spiritual person, a loyal follower of Jesus Messiah.
Alex, let me ask you a question. What's the difference between upright and holy?
Well, there isn't a lot of difference. This would emphasize more what we would see in a person's life, their devotion to God, their consistency in their spirituality.
Okay. You quote here James 1:27, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans, widows in their affliction, to keep oneself unstained from the world.
Well, that's the last phrase here, unstained from the world. And that's why some of your translations say holy. It's a person who lives the Christian life. It's a person who's a spiritually minded person, a person who loves to read the Bible. They love to pray. They love to be with God's people. They're consistent with the faith. You won't look at them and say, they're not really living the Christian life. In that sense, they're holy and they're separate from the world.
The last qualification in this chapter is discipline. And my first question is, what's the difference? He just mentioned self-controlled a few words earlier, and now he mentions discipline. What's the difference between those two words?
Well, it does show us that discipline is a very important character quality of a steward of God's house. Here would be more the control of bodily appetites. I would say it would deal with things like sexuality, gambling, anything that would be a lack of control in our passions, in our bodily things. There is a wonderful quote here by Philip Towner where he separates self-control and discipline, showing that one emphasizes more control of the body and appetites. Why don't you read that?
Yeah, Towner says, in expressing ideas of self-restraint and control over the emotions and passions, the term discipline overlaps with self-control, but emphasizes more the control of the body and appetites, whereas self-control has more to do with the thought life and subsequent behavior. From Paul's use of the concept in a discussion of sexual relations in marriage, 1 Corinthians 7:9, and in reference to his own behavior, 1 Corinthians 9:25, the focus on restraint of physical desires becomes clear. So this is more about the flesh, physical passions.
Well, think of where we're losing probably thousands of pastors and churches. Sexual immorality, affairs among pastors. Some of the statistics are hardly believable, and it has caused the general society to look down at pastors and religious people as hypocrites because they have the biggest problem with their sexuality and getting involved with the opposite sex. So it really is a very relevant thing that a person shows self-control in these physical areas. I would say someone who's involved in pornography is certainly covered under this. They're not showing self-control. And every man has to show self-control over his, well, it could even include spiritual laziness or greed. Anything that tempts the flesh or battles with the flesh, we need to have self-control and need to show it.
So many Proverbs, like Proverbs 25:28, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. What a great word picture.
Well, the wall protected the city from invaders. So if you don't have self-control, you have no protection from the next lust, the next passion, the next temptation. And I go back to Joseph. Think of that wonderful chapter in Genesis where Joseph, this 18-year-old young man, is tempted by Potiphar's wife. And you could imagine she is probably a beauty since he's a wealthy man and can choose any woman he wanted. Joseph refuses her, rejects her offers, and says, I will not do this wicked thing against God. And he also doesn't want to do anything against his employer. So it's a perfect example of a young man having his flesh tempted probably in the most extraordinary way. And he says, no. He turns from her and he flees, which is the answer to many of these temptations. Flee, run away, get away from it.
I always thought it interesting that Paul includes self-control as part of the spirit-controlled life in Galatians 5.
It's the last of the 9 fruits of the Spirit, yes. And it's such an important quality of life. You're not going to be a Bible reader. You're not going to be a man of prayer. You're not going to be a person of service to the Lord's people if you can't control yourself. If you can't control your time, your appetites, your sleep, your eating, it affects every part of life.
I don't know if you have it in this edition of Biblical Eldership, but I know you had it in your first one, that incredible quote from Martin Lloyd-Jones, who said, and I'm going off memory, but something like, I defy you to read the life of any saint who's adorned the church and not discover at once that the main attribute of their life was discipline and order.
Oh, it's one of the great quotes of life for me. Yes, if you want that quote, just write me and I'll send that quote to you. I don't think I put it in this edition of the book. I'm sorry.
Alex, any other closing comments on this chapter?
Well, I think you'd look at the big picture. An elder is God's steward. That's a pretty awesome statement. What a position over God's household. The emphasis in both these lists is on character. He has the negative, the 5 vices, and he has these 7 positive virtues. When we're looking for an elder, even a deacon, we need to look at character, public reputation, because if they violate any of these things that we have just looked here, it will bring disgrace on the gospel and on the local church. So let's insist upon these things. If a man does not meet all these qualities, well, then let's work with him. That's what discipleship is. Let's help him to achieve these virtues that God demands of us. And he actually demands them of all Christians, not just elders. And an elder is an exemplary Christian. So if you're assessing a man's character for eldership, he falls short on some of these, which is very common, maybe the norm. You say, let's work on this. Let's work on your temper. There's good books on temper, on anger. If a person has a problem with self-control, well, there's whole books on this. Mm-hmm. We can work with a person. Might take a year, might take 2 years. I know that in our eldership, we've had this happen to us several times where a man is brought to eldership, brought to the congregation, and it's obvious that he is not proficient in some of these qualifications. So we say, okay, let's just wait and work on it. Might take 6 months, might take a year, and until we feel this person meets the qualifications. So let's don't give up on people. Let's disciple them. Let's lead them. Let's be a help to them.
Biblical Eldership Resources is committed to equipping church elders to help them be effective, godly leaders of the church. Please consider donating to the ministry so that we can continue to provide essential eldership resources for church elders around the world. To donate, go to biblicaeldership.com.